How do you see the evolution of Indian foreign policy over the years?
Indian foreign policy did not start from 1947. Otherwise, there would not have been any Chanakya. Chanakya had brought out every aspect of how a nation should be well governed. In its foreign policy, security policy, economic, agriculture, culture, Buddhism, and its spread was also part of our foreign policy. And I have given two occasions where Nehru missed the chance. First, when India was offered the UNSC seat, he sort of very grandly said, no, give it to China. So I'm sorry to use that word, but I think it was the most foolish thing one could have done as a leader. Panchsheel was the greatest deception. That the moment you signed Panchsheel, then you cannot have a say on what China does in Tibet. POK was just about roughly 14,000 square kilometers. Gilgit-Baltistan is 70,000 square kilometers. It's nearly 85,000 square kilometers which we've lost. I was shocked to find a telegram by the American ambassador then to Washington saying that both Pakistan and India are in economic trouble. So this is the right time to teach Nehru some rules of international behavior. And this is the time. American games, what it does to a country, you never know. In fact, Wesley Clark, an American general, he said once I had gone to the Pentagon and there were generals sitting there and they were making a plan for the next 5 years and they were deciding which 7 countries have to be destabilized.
On one hand, we have Pakistan. On one hand, we have China. With both the nations, we have our border issue. Then with Nepal, again, we didn't deal with them properly. Then there's Bangladesh, which is burning. So that border is also live now. Sri Lanka is having their own economic issues. Then we have Bhutan, which always has been neutral, will stay neutral. Then we have Myanmar to the other side, where like China has been doing a lot of aggressive posturing. And how do we deal with all of this? Namaste Jai Hind, my name is Jayesh Gangan and this is The J Report, a podcast for all your intellectual curiosities. On tonight's episode, my guest is Mr. Rajiv Dogra. Rajiv Dogra sir is a career diplomat. He has spent a lot of time inside Indian diplomacy and he has traveled across the globe for India. He is also an author of 8 books. All of his books are about varied subjects and his expertise into the Indian diplomacy. On this particular episode, we talk about what is happening inside Indian foreign policy, how has it evolved over the years, and we also talk about what is happening around the globe and what will be dangerous for India in the coming future. This podcast is for all the geopolitical nerds out there, so I hope you'll enjoy this. Watch this till the end and do leave your comments down below. So, welcome on the podcast. I've been looking forward to having a conversation with you since many years because off the camera, I was telling you I started reading your books when I was in journalism college. And to be able to be in front of you and to have a conversation with you is a privilege in itself. So, firstly, sir, welcome on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted that not only have you read my books, but you have an expertise on them because you've read them with an understanding that does not normally come by just skipping through pages, but by actually analyzing it and trying to absorb the message and then filter for yourself what you think you agree with or disagree with. So I'm glad you adopted this method, and at the end of it, you found it favorable enough to invite me to your show. So
Yes.
congratulations. I believe it's a new show,
Yeah.
and I wish it great success.
Thank you so much, sir. So, in this podcast, we are talking about the evolution of Indian foreign policy over the years, and with that, we'll also be speaking about what is happening in general in whole world. Because, as we know, there are a lot of fires at a lot of places. Ukraine, Russia, there's something happening over there. Bangladesh, something is happening there. Israel, Hamas, Iran, something is happening over there. Sudan, there's something happening. A lot of things are happening. But let's begin with Indian history first, because I believe if there's anything, any substantial foreign policy that we can compare the current policies with, it's with the Nehru's policies, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru's policies. You you were one of those persons who has seen India evolve over the years because you were born in 1948. How do you see the evolution of Indian foreign policy over the years?
Firstly, I think there are certain things which are in your blood as a country, as a people. You're born with those traditions. And I am of the firm belief that Indian foreign policy did not start from 1947. Otherwise, there would not have been any Chanakya. And to my mind, Chanakya's book,
Arthashastra?
Arthashastra, is perhaps one of the best books written on a whole of nation approach, which Americans are now tom-tomming. Chanakya had brought out every aspect of how a nation should be well governed in its foreign policy, security policy, economic, agriculture, culture, uh, interpersonal relationships. So he also gave great attention to the foreign aspect of the national policy and the military aspect. So Chanakya definitely was not the first one to come up with the idea. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had Vasudev Kutumbakam. The entire idea is that the world is one. That is foreign policy. But beyond that, there are visible symbols of Indian foreign policy in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, Angkor Wat.
Right.
Uh, it is one of the largest complexes of temples in the world. It meant that India had a message to give, and that is why it was adopted in countries which are not very close to India. And that was an example of successful foreign policy, a foreign policy which was not aggressive, but which was acceptable. So, foreign policy has been a continuing tradition in India from ancient times. Of course, the reach dependent. Another aspect, when I was in Rome as ambassador, there was about at the time of Caesars, there was a philosopher come lawyer who was very well regarded called Pliny the Senior. He wrote that Italy is at the risk of going bankrupt because of the amount of silk and spices it is importing from India. So it means that India was reaching out to the world even at that time, 2,500 years ago. The Silk Route, of course, the main road went from China to Europe, but there were branches which touched India. And in my travels, I was very surprised to see in Samarkand, there is still Hindi Bazaar.
Okay.
And there are money changers who were operating there,
Right.
and their shops were still visible. They were not operating any longer. So India and Indians traveled far and wide. I mean, I've given you the example of East, Angkor Wat, given you the example of Italy, and in between the other side, the Eurasian part. The memory we have has been blotted somewhat. But before I come to that, let me also say that Buddhism and its spread was also part of our foreign policy. It was part of the Indian message to the world, whichever part of the world accepted it. It was accepted in China, it was accepted in Southeast Asia in a major way. So, religion, culture, trade, economic, the range was diverse and range was large. I think the interregnum of raids on India, which I also believe perhaps was a product of India reaching out. And people had the idea that India had tremendous riches. India's roads were paved with gold, and the canals were probably also flowing with money. So you had people wanting to come here, loot, plunder, and go back. And this started about 1,000 years back. And it did not stop. I mean, people came here, looted, murdered, killed, and took away the treasures, went back. India recovered again, and again it became rich. Again, someone came. Till finally the Mughals came and decided to settle down here because they were kicked out. Babur was kicked out of his birthplace in Uzbekistan. So he had nowhere to go back, despite all the distortions of historical accounts. He did want to be buried in Kabul because he liked its, the cooler climate compared to Delhi. But that apart, the fact is that they were not forced to stay here in Delhi. They chose to stay in Delhi because they had a vast empire. Plus, they had nowhere to go back to. But that also meant that India as such, India of the great days, was no longer there. India was now known as Mughal Empire. So, which was not the heart of India or true India, as you say. After that, the British came. Uh, uh, some people like to praise Britain into the skies and say that they were very good for India. But I would say that they did extreme harm to India. Had they not been there and had Mughals been defeated by someone like Shivaji or someone else, Maharana Pratap, perhaps we would have then recovered and started reliving our glory days of before these invasions. I don't think any historian has looked at it or any economist has done a deep study of, because British brought the poverty level to an extreme position. British also were responsible for desertification and droughts in many parts because they refused, unlike the Rajas and Nawabs, they refused to help the Kisan, the peasant, when there was a rain shortfall. The others, Rajas and Nawabs, used to reach out to peasants so that they could make up for that difficult time. The British period was only self-serving as far as Britain was concerned. Its foreign policy was what it suited it. 1947, even before 1947, the Indian leadership was aware that they would have to live up to the responsibility of India as a great nation and India as a great civilization. So once they became independent, free of the British, they would have to send out a message to the world that, look, we are back. We are back to get our rightful place in the world. And we are back also to be with others who have suffered like us. Fortunately, we had leaders, not just one, but many leaders, who thought big and who planned for the future, who had a vision in terms of foreign policy as well. And that is why from about mid-1940s, Congress had a foreign policy cell and Pandit Nehru was in charge of it. Let me elaborate a little on how this foreign policy worked. India became independent in 1947, but most of Africa did not.
Right.
Parts of Asia did not. So one was to champion their cause, to send out a message to them that, look, you're not alone, we are with you. That was good policy. Second was, especially in Africa, there was a huge amount of racism, whites against blacks. Again, India took up that cause. It took some time, but eventually by early 60s, all these countries were free of their colonial masters. But the exploitation had not stopped. To give you a recent case, Niger, finally they picked up courage and threw out the French. But do you know that till they took that decision, and they were rich in gold and uranium, 90% of the mine's productions were being taken away by France.
Okay.
Niger was getting only 10%. It is like saying that you open a tap in your house and you decide that 90% of the tap should be water should be with you, and the people living downstairs should just get a trickle. So that is why countries like Niger were miserable and they were fuming till they took courage, and that is why they could not develop. So it was a continuing struggle even after their independence, and that is why the concept of uh, the new term is Global South. But much before that, concrete action took place when the G77 started, when developing countries came together, and India took a leadership role there, both by providing assistance, technical assistance, financial assistance, and by insisting that the developed countries had an obligation to give 0.7% of their GDP as aid
Right.
to the developing world. Of course, except for a few Scandinavian countries, it did not materialize because even though they were rolling in riches, the West said, why should we part with our riches? So maximum 0.2% or 3% was given. And that's a pity because a country like America can spend billions of dollars in trying to squash a country's head, but it will not give a few dollars to make sure that that country can stand out and raise its head high. That was not part of the American agenda, or let's say the Western agenda. So India's role was appreciated. Uh, that is why, in 60s, 70s, even 80s, wherever you went, people would say three things: India, Nehru, Raj Kapoor.
Hmm.
So there was this soft power and there was this great power called Nehru, and there was this great nation called India. So from 1947, we had traveled a long way and traveled along the principles that we held dear. Uh, the story is long, but let me say that we were lucky to have a set of leaders, be it Mahatma Gandhi, Maulana Azad, Sardar Patel, or Pandit Nehru, who gave us certain ideals and certain ideas uh, and a certain sense of responsibility towards us, towards our nation, and towards the world. So that, in sum, was the foreign policy of those years.
But then, I don't know what is the right term, but there are a lot of people today who do not agree with Jawaharlal Nehru's foreign policies. For example, we all know the UNSC seat. It was a big blunder on our part. Apart from that, our relationship with China, again, it started off when we gave early recognition to People's Republic of China. Some people think that was a blunder again. Do you also think that specifically this thing, giving China an early recognition, was a blunder on India's part?
You know, since you've read India's World, where I've described the policies of 8 prime ministers, and it starts with Pandit Nehru. And I've given two occasions where Nehru missed the chance. He missed the bus, or India missed the bus, because of his decision, which was absolutely wrong. First, in 1951, I think, when India was offered the UNSC seat, he sort of very grandly said, no, 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 give it to China. Uh, I'm sorry to use that word, but I think it was the most foolish thing one could have done as a leader because you sacrificed your own interests. By your own interests, I mean India's interests, without so much as consulting the cabinet. Then in 1955 or 56, Khrushchev and Bulgarian came here and they said, we've been thinking and we would very much like to take up the issue of India becoming a permanent member of the Security Council. Again, Nehru did not bat an eyelid. He did not consult his cabinet. He said, no, 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 it's not the time. Now, if that was not the time, I mean, would heaven sort of give some directions or indications or some astrologer tell you what is the right time? So, Nehru made not only this blunder, as you said, he also made a huge blunder in terms of China. Panchsheel, for example,
Right.
was the greatest deception. Nehru felt very happy Indo-China bhai bhai, Hindi-Chini bhai bhai. But Chinese purpose all along was that the moment you sign Panchsheel, then you cannot have a say on what China does in Tibet.
Right.
Next day, they annexed it. So, in a position like that, as Prime Minister, you have to think in terms of the country's long-term interests. Nehru, of course, thought in terms of long-term interests, but he also blundered in miscalculating what should have been in India's interest and what his actions would have meant for India. For example, going to UN on
Kashmir.
the Kashmir
Yeah.
issue. What was the need? Your army was doing well. Given a chance, they would have, forced Pakistanis out of a few hundred or few thousand square kilometers more. But no, we go to the UN Security Council and make a mess of it.
Right.
And he admitted as much in parliamentary debates later in 50s. But what is the point? I mean, he was not going to be hanged for having made that thing. But the country has been hanged. Country has been placed in a very difficult position because people don't realize Jammu and Kashmir is not just POK. POK was just about 14,000, roughly 14,000 square kilometers. Gilgit-Baltistan, which is also part of Kashmir, is 70,000 square kilometers. So 70 plus 14, whatever, is nearly 85,000 square kilometers which we've lost. So the first message that I want to give through your program is that please don't think it is only 14,000 square kilometers. It is a huge chunk that Pakistan holds, including part of it which Pakistan gave to China in 1963. Not only that, there is Aksai Chin. Again, Nehru's miscalculation. About 38,000 square kilometers.
Right.
That is with China. We've given Kachativu Island to Sri Lanka. We've given some villages to Bangladesh. I mean, please give me one example in the world where a country has been so generous with its territory that, okay, you want something? Here it is. Countries fight for every square inch of the land.
Right.
That is what is happening in Russia, Ukraine. That is what is happening in Israel, Hamas. So countries don't give up land just because some fancy seems to strike them. So I would fault Nehru gravely on these things.
What was his reasoning behind these blunders? I mean, in his mind, all of these decisions were correct. In the hindsight, we can say those were probably a blunder. But then, what was his reasoning behind these decisions?
I would say, I mean, I wouldn't like to be harsh on a particular person, whether it is Nehru or Vajpayee or the present Prime Minister, because we don't know the entire details. But the reading of whatever is available for me as a diplomat and for the general public through whatever is there in the published sources is that perhaps it was a combination of bad advice given by bureaucrats and the diplomats who were serving him at that time, and his own misreading of the situation. That maybe if he's generous, the other side may mend its ways. This did not happen. In terms of Kashmir, it was Mountbatten who fooled him. So you cannot pin it down to just one thing. There were many circumstances. Secondly, to be generous to him, please also remember that India at that time, right up to 70s, was miserably poor. It was fighting with droughts year after year. It was fighting with food shortages year after year. Industrialization had not yet picked up. So his attention was to bring up India, make it stand on its own. And that is why he did Bhabha Atomic Research Center, space, this thing, IITs, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, IAMs, and steel plants, power plants. So he did an enormous amount of work in a relatively short period of time, and brought India to a level where it could be reasonably independent in affairs of the world. So yes, he is to be blamed for certain huge blunders which countries paying for even now. But all said and done, he felt for India and he worked for India.
But then, why do we have to criticize Nehru's foreign policies to substantiate today's foreign policies? I mean, there are a lot of people who badmouth Nehru on social media or even in like news now. Why is that?
Well, in bureaucracy, there's a term: nothing succeeds like a successor. So you badmouth your predecessor,
Yeah.
and that is why, in comparison, people think the new man is doing extremely well. But that is one part, and that may not always hold true in politics. But I think fundamentally, it is wrong to pick on him and pick on him repeatedly because we do not know the circumstances, the pressures that he was working under. I'll give you one example. Indus waters. When I was researching for Where Borders Bleed, I was shocked to find a telegram by the American ambassador then in Islamabad to Washington saying that both Pakistan and India are in economic trouble. But India is in a much more vulnerable position financially. So this is the right time to teach Nehru some rules of international behavior. And this is the time when we should get him to sign a treaty on the Indus waters.
Okay.
So it was blackmail, plain and simple blackmail. Otherwise, tell me, what expertise does World Bank have to legislate and give a judgment on sharing of waters?
Right.
Now, another thing, I think it is a first on any television or visual media. I've written about it in India's World, but first thing in any visual media I'm sharing with you. The 6 rivers. Everyone talks 3 rivers. But do you ever put on map where those rivers flow? Has anyone in the senses even looked at the map to make this basic interpretation as to why 3 particular rivers, full waters were to go to Pakistan? Of the 3 other rivers, some waters were still to go to Pakistan, though a major portion was to be retained by India. But why was this distinction made? Why couldn't they simply say 6 rivers, some waters for India, others to go to Pakistan? But why this very, very careful distinction that 3 rivers, their waters must fully go to Pakistan? Do you know where those rivers flow?
No.
In Kashmir.
Okay.
So the idea was to assert the claim that since those rivers belong to Kashmir and go to Pakistan, Kashmir has a
Belongs to
case
Pakistan,
on,
yeah.
Pakistan has a case on Kashmir. The other 3 rivers go through Punjab. So India can feel happy about that. I do not know why we don't analyze such issues. Nehru was under pressure. His chief negotiator at the water talks made a whole lot of blunders, which also I've written about in Where Borders Bleed. But we should have at least done some basic work, at least taken out the map and see why are they doing this. I mean, if I can do it without any resources and in the hurry of finishing my book, after all, this was not the only item on my agenda. This was only incidental because India's world was about 8 prime ministers and their policies. But I suddenly was struck by the fact that why this? 3 rivers fully must go to Pakistan. Then I took out a map and it became crystal clear that they had pulled a fast one on us. America, through World Bank, had pulled a fast one on us.
Hmm. But so again, now coming to Miss Indira Gandhi, if someone reads your book, they'll get to know she was a feisty leader. She had strategies in her mind. She had plan A, plan B, plan C, and if required, plan D as well. And a lot of her ruling years were governed by the Nixon Kissinger era. And again, that was one of those eras where the world was burning and India had its own problems. We were again, now I'll go back to Nehru for a second. Nam, a lot of people have problems with that as well, non-alignment movement. But then Indira Gandhi comes in 71. We are in a tussle with Pakistan over East Pakistan, and then again we signed that treaty with Russia, the peace and friendship treaty, if I'm not wrong it was called. From non-alignment to moving towards Russia, what was that whole scenario?
Well, let me first comment on non alignment. Non alignment was a movement of the developing world. Nehru was not the only originator of it. There was Nasser, there was Tito, and to some extent Castro, who came in later. Uh, the idea was to send out a message to the world that look, there's no point in making small states or developing states your kind of underlings. Let them breathe free. Let them look after their own destiny in their own ways. Don't exploit them. Uh, so the idea was we do not want to get into the battles of the big and get crushed because it's only the small or the grass which gets crushed in the fight of elephants. So, in my opinion, that worked very well. The non alignment movement. That was one at the world level. But there is also a distinction. India was non aligned. Non alignment movement is one thing. India was non aligned because it held the belief, and rightly so, that if we go and ally with, let's say, the American bloc, the Western bloc, then we will lose our independence of action, independence of thought, and independence of development. On the other hand, if we go with Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc, then we are choosing a way of life which does not suit us because that was a restricted way of life. So that is why we said that we are a non-aligned country. That means we are not going to be led either by the Western Bloc or by the Eastern Bloc. It served us very well. Now I come to your other question. Then why did we sign that treaty with Russia? That treaty with Russia was for the limited purposes of security. It did not mean that India had aligned. Nowhere in this treaty the word ally is used.
Right.
India had not aligned with Russia and it had a definite time frame. So I think that confusion should not be there. There are two distinct phases and two distinct things. One was the need of the hour, just as other was the need of the hour in a different sense, non-aligned and non-alignment. The treaty was the need of the hour because of the strategic
Was
compulsions
it
involved.
because of the Pakistan China America nexus?
Absolutely, because Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon were hell bent that India should be taught a lesson and hell bent that India should not succeed. Uh, they would have been happy if China had, either attacked India or done some troop movements to scare India. In fact, Henry Kissinger went a number of times to Paris to meet the Chinese ambassador there and also to New York to meet the Chinese PR there and kept pressing them that why don't you do this? Why don't you at least make some troop movements to, unnerve India? To the Chinese credit of that time, uh, they did not comply. So India had got wind of these American moves, and India had also known, or Mrs. Gandhi had known very clearly, that Nixon, Kissinger combined is no good news for India. So it had to have a fallback position for itself in case things became difficult or very difficult. So the treaty, Indo-Russian treaty, was also on account of that.
Okay. And what do you think was the biggest achievement in terms of foreign policies for Indira Gandhi?
Well, I think I would expand that question of yours and say the biggest achievement, in my opinion, of India's foreign and strategic policy since 1947 has been what Mrs. Gandhi did and the way she went about doing it. Having said that, let me also say that she had been careful or she was blessed with advisors, both ministerial and bureaucratic, who were outstanding in their own right. So she got the benefit of the right advice, be it Swaran Singh, Jagjeevan Ram, or the Raw Chief, or her Principal Secretary Haksar. So there was a group of people who were balanced, who were wise, and who kept measuring up to her expectations. But above all is always the leader, and that leader was Indira Gandhi.
Right.
Almost 7 to 8 months before the war started, and I forgot, one should also credit Manek Shah and his army, Air Force, and Navy. Uh, about 7 8 months before the war was to start, Indira Gandhi had already traveled, besides USA, to a number of other countries, Romania, Egypt, England, and so on, to assess the mood there, not to reveal her plans. In fact, the Nixon Kissinger were helpless when they were talking to her because though they were very hostile, and so was the defense secretary, Indira Gandhi kept her cool. She did not reveal that, after she goes back home, she might actually order the attack or respond to Pakistan. The other thing, as I said earlier, also the term whole of nation approach, that was a time when whole of nation approach was in its full play.
Hmm.
The country was united. There was determination that whatever sacrifices are needed, after all, various estimates say there were 10 million Bangladeshis who were
Knocking on our
living as
doorsteps.
refugees
Yeah.
in India. And it was a huge task. Plus, if Nixon, Kissinger, as leaders of USA, were against India, she said, why not approach the social media of that time? That means the rock stars
Right.
and the news media. And she did that successfully. She and her aides did that successfully, with the result that people were turning against their leaders. They said that the policies that these two people are making or holding on to is wrong because atrocities are being committed in
Right.
Bangladesh. So, in a way, they were on back foot after some time.
When we talk about the Simla Agreement, again, in your book, you have mentioned a lot of points. I want you to relay those points because uh, was particularly about Kashmir, was that our chance to resolve the Kashmir issue? Was the Simla Agreement a blunder on Indira Gandhi's part?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. If victory was the greatest achievement of Indira Gandhi, victory in Bangladesh war, Simla Agreement was the greatest blunder, one of the greatest blunders. The other blunder was emergency, imposition of emergency. Uh, and I won't even say that Indira Gandhi was wrongly advised because when she decided to agree to Bhutto's proposal, they were walking
Mm.
outside the guest house in Simla. So there was no one around. So she came back and announced this to her aides, who were, to put it mildly, very surprised. Uh, you see, Bhutto had a reputation of being devious. He had a, like the British High Commissioner in Pakistan of that time, wrote to his Foreign Office headquarters that here is a man who was born to be hanged. Then, before she went to, or in Simla, I think one of her aides told her that when you shake hands with the Bhutto, count your fingers. So, after all this evidence, if you get taken in by that crook, then only you are to be blamed. Bhutto, in his heydays, had two principal confidants or advisors. One was a Muhajir. I've written the name in India's World, so if anyone wants, you can look it up. And when I was in Karachi, he told me that I went to the Wagah border to receive Bhutto when he came back from Simla. And naturally, he was jumping with joy, Bhutto, and he hugged his confidant. The name is on my tip
Yeah.
of the confidant, but I don't want to reveal it. Just keep the suspense going. I made a fool of that woman. Now, doesn't that say everything? Must. I mean, is it necessary to add even a single word after that? Bhutto had no intention of living up to his promise that आप मुझ पे भरोसा रखिए,
Right.
मैं वापस चले जाऊं और ये शिमला, आई मीन कश्मीर का मसला सॉल्व हो जाएगा. He had no intention of living up to that promise. He was lying through his teeth, and he was a man known for deceit, deception, and everything despicable in politics. And he was the one who ensured that, much against his wishes, Ayub started a war in 65. He was the one who did eventually what happened in East Pakistan portion of that time, because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had won the majority. But he was driven by wild ambition,
Right.
almost insane ambition. So he did not want Mujib to become the prime minister, even though it was offered to him that you can have a sharing arrangement, half the time for Mujib, half the time for you. But that was not a part of his agenda.
Right.
So all the atrocities in Bangladesh, even now when you think of it, and I hope it does not happen again, a huge number of those people were Hindus. Hindu women were raped, Hindu men were killed, and so on. So much so that roadblocks were made of Hindu bodies. We forget easily. But I think as a nation, we must have a long-term memory so that we do not repeat those mistakes.
Right.
That is why I wrote all these books, because I must tell you that Before me, foreign service officers had largely written memoirs or written about their particular experience, as a spell in foreign office. But that is not foreign policy. I was the first one to take up where borders bleed, which again, not just from the foreign office point of view, but from the Indian point of view, was the first of its kind. Because before that, unfortunately, our books were basically a sort of an reinterpretation or a retype, to be a little more cruel, of what the British historians had already written. And it was laced with British subjectivity. So I went back to analyze as to when did this idea start of partition? When did this idea start of Hindu-Muslim as separate nation? And how did it develop in time? So I think it is very important for us to remember history, to record history, and not to forget history.
So we'll talk about Pakistan more in our Hindi episode, but then I think there's one thing which I want you to address in this podcast. Every time we deal with Pakistan, our army does well, like be it 47, be it 71, we have done brilliantly well. But in fact, Kargil war as well, we lose the war when it comes to talks. In 47, Nehru goes to UN, Kashmir issue becomes international. In 71, again, the Simla agreement was a blunder. Then during the Vajpayee Advani days, there was the Agra summit, which again, we can call it a blunder maybe. Why do we lose the war in these talks?
You know, part of it has to do with our DNA. कि भाई छोड़ दो, चलो कह रहे हैं तो दे दो. No other country does that. They come determined with a plan and they stick to that plan. They made sure that they achieved their objective, especially in national terms. You see, de do is okay when you're negotiating an international agreement because everyone is involved. So instead of is, if there is was, or instead of T, if there is X, how does it matter? Because everyone would be a loser, everyone would be a gainer. But when it comes to bilaterals, one should not adopt that attitude. One should think single-mindedly of what is your objective and make sure that you get that objective.
Right.
You forgot 65 war.
True, yeah.
You know, Haji Pir, which is such a strategic objective.
We had captured Haji Pir.
We had captured Haji Pir, and it was thanks to the Indian army that we captured that peak with considerable difficulty. But to give it away across the table is really a pity.
Yeah.
Because Haji Pir, they are in a dominant position to trouble Indian army. Plus, it makes Indian army's route further north so much more longer. And had Haji Pir been with us, the things would have been reversed. Yeah. Pakistan army would have had to travel another 100 plus kilometers to reach their positions in north. But we just gave it away.
Right.
71, again, it was the same situation. Anyway, we'll talk about it, as you said, later. But we have this unfortunate mindset where we say, "Ne, bechara hai, de do." But the other fellow is not a bechara. He's just trying to be clever.
So, what kind of role does diplomacy play in the success of a country's foreign policy? Because as we were talking about this thing, we always lose the wars when it comes to the talking stage, when we are on the table. How important is it for our leaders to understand what really diplomacy is?
You know, it'll be unfair to say that leaders do not listen to diplomats or bureaucrats. They do listen. But ultimately, the buck stops with them. After listening, they may not take the decision which they have been advised on. They may take a decision which suits them, they think politically, whether for internal reasons or external reasons. So it is unfortunate uh, that if they have been advised by a group of a particular course of action, and then on a solo uh, decision, they decide to take something which ultimately proves to be the wrong choice. But then he's the supreme leader, so there's nothing that can be done about it.
Okay. So we spoke about Pakistan. The other thing which I wanted to touch upon was China again, because um, two ancient civilizations. India says we agree to that philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, whereas the Chinese philosophy is of Middle Kingdom. Is this like the war of two civilizations that's going on? Because where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means one world, one family, China's Middle Kingdom, more or less, it means China is at the center of the world and it is the supreme, and all the other kingdoms around it are under it. So, is this war of two civilizations that's happening?
Firstly, I think after that clash of civilizations became a point of conversation. This term, in some variation, is thrown around every few years. Uh, you can have a war of civilization, to use your term, if the civilizations are in touch with each other. How many Indians travel to China? How many Chinese come here as tourists? Now, that means you don't understand each other. If you have not visited, let's say, just to take an example, New Delhi or Beijing, you don't know what that city looks like, what dynamics are at play there socially or culturally. So how can you then jump on to that huge terminology, clash or war of two civilizations? Yes, there's no doubt both China and India are ancient civilizations and great civilizations. Maybe episodically, I would say, there were breaks, but no one can doubt the fact that there were civilizations with a lot to be proud of. The differences are on a different level. They're not at a civilizational level. Sorry. And the differences are at an attitudinal level, and the differences are at a level of ambition. China, as you very rightly said, is the middle kingdom that thinks that every state around it or every other state in the world is a vassal state compared to it, and that must pay tribute to it or homage to it frequently. So there is one country at the top, at the summit, and that can only be China.
Yeah.
That's clear as far as China is concerned. And they feel irritated when India says that, it also has a claim at the summit. That is one. Second is the issue of borders. India has been diffident. China has been quite clear that these are our borders. This is our claim line. And we are going to make sure that it comes to us. Now, even about Arunachal Pradesh, they said it's South Tibet. Ladakh, they have other claims. India has never said that Mansarovar belongs to us. After all, everyone knows why Indians go to Mansarovar. It's not a new practice. So if tradition and history was any guide, then why haven't we said Mansarovar
Right.
belongs to us? Why have we gone by only the McDonald line? Even that was a rather rough kind of a determination. So, by keeping our claim less than clear, because when they intrude into our territory, we say, no, 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 the border has not been demarcated, so we can't say that they've intruded. Now, if it has not been demarcated, then we must have also gone across to the other
Right.
side. Why don't Chinese ever say that border has not been demarcated, so we can't say Indians have not intruded? So I think there's a lot of fresh thinking that needs to be done.
Right. But then when we know what China and Pakistan are doing in partnership, they keep China keeps helping Pakistan time to time. Why don't we establish diplomatic relationship with Taiwan just to irk China?
Well, it's not only India, but the entire world, including America, does not want to upset China
What is the reason behind that?
because China is too powerful now.
But isn't their economy also falling now?
So we think, you see, if the latest figures are any guide, Chinese economy has developed by something like 5%. Let's assume it's not even 5%, 4%. What does 4% mean for a 16 or 17 trillion economy? So it means anything between $600 billion more in the last 1 year, or if it is 5%, it could mean even up to 80 or 90, $900 billion more. Now, that's not something to sneeze at. So, and China does not have the same kind of engagements abroad that America has, nor does it need to worry about closing the economic tap or opening the economic tap that America has, because whatever America does is noted around the world immediately. As far as China is concerned, we are only guessing largely that this could be 5%, this could be 4% or 8% or whatever, and that construction industry has slowed down. But we are not sure as to what extent that industry has slowed down. We are not sure as to what extent their steel factories have closed down. After all, they are producing almost 1 billion tons of steel every year. But no one knows how much are they producing now. So, as far as China is concerned, their opaqueness is an advantage to them.
Okay. Coming back to our subject, sir, moving on to the next prime minister, and that is Rajiv Gandhi. Now, ye- if someone reads the book, they come across Rajiv Gandhi as someone who had aspirations, but then his arrogance came in between. How do you see his foreign policies?
Uh, see, when Indira Gandhi became the prime minister, she was not prepared
Hmm.
for the job. Uh, she learned on the job uh, when she became the prime minister. Uh, Rajiv Gandhi was not interested in the job. He became the prime minister because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
The second thing is that initially he may have been impetuous because he was young and fresh in the job. So he may have taken certain decisions which did not seem to be right. But please remember that in foreign policy, he eventually got the respect of Reagan, I think, at that
Yeah.
time. So much so that Reagan trusted him to take his word to Moscow. So much so that America decided that India will be the regional head, and if there is any trouble or anything needs to be done, rather than America, let India take care of it. So much so that during Rajiv Gandhi's time, the defense expenditure was to the tune of 4%
Mm.
of the GDP or whatever, which has never been achieved
Yeah.
since then. So much so that during his time, Mirage 2000 were bought, submarines were bought, new a lot of ships were bought. So defense got a huge boost during his time. He was the one who authorized the Maldives operation. He also authorized Sri Lanka operation, which was a failure. But then that is the luck of the draw. He had his failures, but he also had his successes. His tenure was short. Uh, so I think had he been there for another 5 years or so, uh, perhaps even during his lifetime, the things that he started, for example, in telecommunication, which later became
Yeah.
almost a revolution, his contribution was immense. So I would not like to underestimate his achievements. I would say that his intentions were good, and in certain fields, he certainly uh, made a difference.
Right. But then you call PV Narasimha Rao, or probably he was the one prime minister amongst the list of eight that you have talked about in the book. I feel as if he was the one who took on the mantle from Chanakya. Why is that?
See, we are very quick to attach labels that P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Chanakya and so on. I don't think that's being fair to the man. He was not Chanakya, but he was a wise man, he was a balanced man, and he led the country out of a great economic mess. Because when he took over as prime minister, there was hardly enough foreign exchange to meet our petrol requirements for about a week. So things were really bad. Uh, but gradually, he brought us out of that slum. And by the time he was midway through his tenure, we were at 6.5% growth. So he was astute. He did not lose calm when he was faced with so many difficult issues. But he was no Chanakya. Uh, he led the country well, but he was not tested in a major way except on the economic issue. Please remember whether the information is correct or not. When the Babri episode took place, he said he was in the puja room. Now, a prime minister has to lead from the front.
But then, do you think like opening up of economy was one of the biggest achievements in that era?
We had no choice. We were forced by IMF, World Bank, and in fact, it had started uh, even before Mr. Narasimha Rao took over as prime minister. Otherwise, we would have gone down the tube. So this was to some extent dictated
Hmm.
by external forces, but in the end, it served us well. The economic liberalization served us well. The momentum that started then kept going,
Yeah.
kept increasing, and kept multiplying. Uh, I can't say that we've reached the optimum level, far from it, but at least a new direction was given to the economy, and a new hope that the bureaucratic controls are being lessened and you are freer to exercise your business options. So that
Right.
was there.
But did Manmohan Singh have anything to do with it? Because a lot of credit for this economic liberalization is given to him. And I've heard some from the left say he is the sole creditor of this. Then from the right, there are arguably good arguments. Was he the sole reason why we did what we did?
Well, Dr. Manmohan Singh must be credited with his contribution at a difficult time. But please remember, he was the finance minister at that time. Mr. Narasimha Rao was the prime minister. So, as I said earlier, the buck stopped with him. He was the one who had to take all the critical decisions. So, yes, Mr. Manmohan Singh was a wise economist. Uh, he did well to understand the situation the country was facing. But ultimately, the critical decisions are always made by the prime minister. And there, uh, Narasimha Rao chose and decided well.
Right. So what happened in the Agra summit? Because at one hand, where we were blaming Musharraf and Pakistan, on the other hand, okay, we invite him here. Our army gives him an official salute. And while the talks are going on, he speaks about how the militants or the terrorists of Kashmir are actually freedom fighters. How did we let that happen? How did we let him speak with the media and speak openly about something that we shouldn't have?
Just a few minutes back, you said we'll talk about Pakistan tomorrow. But
But then Pakistan plays such an important role in India's foreign policy that I have to go back to them.
you see, often I say that we are a country of 1.45 billion Pakistan exports. So, without talking of Pakistan, our food is not digested properly. So, anyway, to talk about
Yeah.
Musharraf and the Agra summit, I think the fault lies perhaps in the stars that things moved in certain directions. But the fault also lies with both sides.
Hmm.
Firstly, Musharraf tried to grandstand with the media. And unfortunately, except for one journalist, the others sort of were almost slavish. Uh, and that's the unfortunate part because I'll give you another incident. Bilawal Bhutto, who's not thought very highly of in Pakistan, came here for the SCO summit in Goa. Uh, and there, uh, he was dictating terms to a couple of our journalists to the extent of saying that, you remove Article 370 or you remove the statehood and see what happens in that state. In a way, threatening. And when a person like that is threatening, you should ask him as to what exactly do you have in mind. But we were looking scared, those particular people. So similarly here, Musharraf thought that he had conquered India because press is a representative voice. And they were so docile that they lapped up whatever he said without even questioning for themselves or thinking in their mind that he was just grandstanding. After that, things went downhill because we thought that that is not the way to conduct negotiations in good faith. Then, of course, all the issues relating to the document and so on, and once you start, nitpicking or negotiating, then it is becomes an endless exercise. Uh, a person can stall the finalization of document for days and months together, and that's exactly what happened. That the trust with which India had invited Musharraf was lost from that press conference, and that was not restored.
Right. But so, coming towards like what is happening in the current day, we have this neighborhood first policy, but then again, on one hand we have Pakistan, on one hand we have China. With both the nations, we have our border issues. Then with Nepal, again, we didn't deal with them properly. We sort of had a big brotherly attitude with them, which Nepal has been complaining about. So it is now divided between China and India, and up to some extent, even Pakistan. Then there's Bangladesh, which is burning. So that border is also live now. Sri Lanka is having their own economic issues. And then, as you said, the Kachativu Island, we just gave that away. Then we have Bhutan, which always has been neutral, will stay neutral. Our northeast is always burning. Then we have Myanmar to the other side, which where like China has been doing a lot of aggressive posturing, and even America has tried to come in over there. How do we deal with all of this? Who is our friend, like a true friend in our own neighborhood?
Well, you sketched out a worrying map, but I must point out that Bhutan was always India friendly,
Yeah.
and we never had any
But then right
issues.
now, they had some talks with China as well, right?
That is why I said in past tense.
Hmm.
Recent developments are worrying, especially after Doklam in
Yeah.
2017, I think. Things have not looked good for Bhutan, for India, and China has taken advantage. So, in that list you sketched out, Bangladesh was also not a worry point
Hmm.
for the last 10 years
Yeah.
at least. Uh, but today, the picture is different. It will be a tough climb back, even with a part of the region, to a place where we can say that we can reach out to them and without any hesitation, and that there'll be a positive response. Uh, Now, let me clarify that in diplomacy, even in the worst of times, you can and you should reach out to them, and the other side also is expected to respond. But that does not mean that response is to a positive conclusion. But the diplomatic courtesies and norms are maintained. Today, the situation is different. We both with Pakistan and China, and now with Bangladesh, we are in tricky waters. Sri Lanka, the new government is going to take over. So let's see what happens there. Maldives needs money, so it is sort of showing some pacifying.
But Maldives is also a failure of ours because we let them go into Chinese lap again. And then we also help them, we give them aid.
Maldives, for a long time, it has been in the Islamic lap. In fact, a recent statistic showed that on per capita basis, the ISIS recruits are the greatest and the largest number from Maldives. It does not mean in numerical terms, but if the Maldives population is, let's say, a couple of lakhs, then out of those couple of lakhs, even if 10, 15, 40 go, on per capita basis, it makes a large number. The others in the population are with Islamic leanings, there's no doubt. So it had been brewing for some time. And the present president, Moizu, he thought that if I make it my agenda, I'll be doing something different and I'll resonate with the people. So, in part, that was the beginning. But he realizes that with Indian tourism down, others not coming in vast numbers, he's facing problems. I mean, he was about to default on the Indian payment. Uh, but it is a pause as far as he's concerned. I don't think he's going to change his stripes. Once he's stabilized the country economically a little bit, he might pursue policies which are not exactly to our taste.
Then why do we help them?
Well, that is the objective of diplomacy. That if we extend help at a time when the other person needs, maybe he might have a change of mind.
But do we know that like 90% he won't, right? There's only a 10% chance. Why do we take that 10% chance?
Because you can't go and fight with everyone. For example, Sri Lanka, we gave them $4+ billion at a time when they were really desperate. China also didn't hold out its hand. But that does not mean that Sri Lanka has changed its ways. In fact, against its own promises, it allowed 3 Chinese ships to dock at Sri Lanka recently when an Indian ship was visiting it. So, unfortunately, despite our efforts, these countries have not been responsive to the extent that should be the norm.
Then who is our friend in our neighborhood? Do we have any friends?
Well, Bhutan still is a friend. Bhutan still is a no. It's a difficult time, and I think we have to just keep on trying.
Yeah.
But things are not rosy to say.
But then so when when we go outside our neighborhood, let's go global. We had a friend in Israel, but Israel now is completely busy in its own matters. Russia, we had some sort of mutual understanding with them. It is busy in its own matters, and Russia and China have come closer. America is a tricky nation. They don't want us to be a regional head. They don't want us to be a international head. They don't want us to be a leader in the Indo-Pacific, but they do need our help. So it's very tricky with them. Who are our friends on a global level? Is India alone, just like Israel? Even Israel still gets some help from America. Whom do we go for help?
No, Israel, to put it correctly, gets a huge amount of help from America. To the extent that America played a very active part in pressurizing directly and indirectly through other countries Iran not to respond in a heavy manner against Israel after 2 deaths of their one Hamas leader and one of their own generals. So America is solidly behind Israel. Whatever occasional statement to the other effect they might make, but that is only cosmetic. America has said repeatedly that they back Israel completely and wholeheartedly. Russia is now gone into another sphere. China, North Korea, Iran. And I don't think that any time in future that link is going to weaken. It might get strengthened if things keep on progressing the way they are in Ukraine. India and America are star-crossed friends. I mean, we say that we are strategic partners or ye wo, but the fact is, as Henry Kissinger had said, that it is dangerous to be America's enemy. It is fatal to be America's friend. And when Americans in 70s were leaving Cambodia, just like in Afghanistan, They said, okay, now you are up to your own devices, and Khmer Rouge swept Cambodia. The Prince of Cambodia wrote a letter to the American ambassador there saying that our biggest fault was that we trusted you. So America just cannot be trusted. And I think it will be wrong to say that we are not aware of that. But sometimes there are compulsions, international compulsions, which leave a country with very little choice. So at the moment, it seems that we must continue to be close to America while not being distant from Russia. But some of the American policies from time to time keep on hurting. For example, just before the Quad meeting yesterday, what was the reason for White House, meaning the national security advisors and his team, to invite the Sikh organizations whose credentials were doubtful
Yeah.
to the White House and to assure them that, look, we are solidly behind you? The message was to India, not so much to them, but much more to India.
Hmm.
So American games, must be analyzed, must be noted with concern, and must be always be a point of serious thought, because what it does to a country, you never know. In fact, Wesley Clark, an American general, he wrote somewhere, and I read it. I think I might have referred to it in wartime. He said once I had gone to the Pentagon, and there were generals sitting there, and they were making a plan for the next 5 years, and they were deciding which 7 countries have to be destabilized. Now, how do you deal with a problem like America?
Mm. But why does America keeps playing this game with India when it knows in Asia there is no other power that can help them tackle China? Why does it keep playing that same game with India over and over again?
Because it thinks that somehow India might reach an accommodation with China, so then it will not play its game. So speculatively, one can say that America wants a sort of a man in South Bloc leading India who will do their bidding, unquestioningly. But that is only speculation. So I think the principal point is that one must keep one's guard up when dealing with America.
Who do you think is better for India when we talk about America, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? First, it was Biden, and when we compare Biden and Trump, I feel both of them were India friendly, but under Biden, the people who were governing, they were not so India friendly. Under Trump, at least the execution of India friendly policies will be on time and according to Trump. But then on the other side, I don't feel that will be the same thing.
You see, in the end, whether it is America or any other country, it's the establishment that drives the agenda. They are the ones who feed the ministers and the top man the policy alternatives. And then, of course, it is up to them to decide which policy to pursue. So that is also the case with America, which means that its policy options, as decided by its bureaucracy, military, or diplomacy, are going to remain largely the same, whichever man is put in charge of the White House. I think the nuance in your question was whether her Indian origin is going to make Kamala Harris more amenable to a warmer role with India. I think sometimes it also acts as an obstruction. One thing is to say that I am Indian. She doesn't say that anymore. And I love India. I had dosa there. But the other thing is to implement policies which actually translate into something of a huge strategic step in case of Indian need. Uh, I doubt whether either of them, Kamala Harris or Trump, would go to that extent. Like, for example, they are going with Israel.
Right. Do you think India might be in a big geopolitical crisis in the coming years? Because as we know, everything around us is going on fire.
Well, wartime, uh, I had analyzed all the possibilities in every which way, and my conclusion was that yes, we should be ready to face a difficult situation. So whether it happens next year or in 2030 or 2035, that I have not said. But I have said that times are not going to be very easy geopolitically for India.
Right. And because we are talking about geopolitics and foreign policies, how do you rate the Modi government's foreign policies since 2014? Because at least one thing which I have personally understood is we don't talk to Pakistan anymore. And that irks Pakistan. That why is India not engaging with us? I cannot say about China because that is a very nuanced and tricky thing. So I want to have your perspective on both Pakistan and China in terms of Indian foreign policy since 2014.
Well, as a principle, I never talk about or against foreign ministry because they are my younger colleagues and I will only applaud them. They are doing the best they can in a difficult circumstance. But to answer your question, not talking is also signaling something. So we should not feel that India is going down the wrong path by not talking at all. Some say that even during war, countries talk. Yes, they do. But then they are doing so with the aim that it might lead to lessening of the war or reaching a peace agreement. So, talking should be with a purpose. When you see the other person has a mental block to normal relationship, then what is the point of talking?
Right.
And our basic uh, message to them has been that please stop terrorism, let us live as neighbors should live, trade with each other, have exchanges. But they say, no, 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 we must have a bomb blast. So the moment there's a bomb involved or a bullet involved, talking goes out of the window.
Yeah.
Uh, as far as China is concerned, you see, the expanding trade, or rather, China's expanding trade, after all, our exports to them are minimal.
Right.
They have about $100 billion worth of surplus, is one sign that, things are not so bad. Second, we have been talking to China at military level, diplomatic level, and sometimes also at the
But
political
there's
level.
no conclusion of those talks, right? I mean, all of those talks have resulted in a failure.
You, you know, you're really hitting back at me that what is the point of having talks with China
Yeah.
if we don't have talks with Pakistan on the point I have
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that all the talks have resulted in failure. After all, there has been disengagement. And after all, there's not been a repeat of Galwan, which was a serious incident. But at the same time, we've not moved very far
Yeah.
up the path. Uh, we have remained largely stagnant, perhaps repeating the same points, perhaps taking one step forward and taking a one step backward. But that is what diplomacy is about, that keep persisting. Maybe someday things might change.
Right.
So with China, it's a different uh, issue. It's not in the same league as Pakistan. China so far has not indulged in terrorism against India. That's the other point. So I think it'll be wrong to compare the two
Hmm.
issues, but it will also be wrong to minimize the danger that China poses. China could perhaps be a greater danger to India in the times ahead.
Right. But then, even after these talks and everything, okay, agreed that there have been disengagements. China is not involved in exporting terrorism to India, but China keeps using its maps aggressively. It keeps claiming Arunachal Pradesh. It keeps renaming places in India. How do we deal with that?
Well, that's why I said that if they are doing that on the basis that sometime in the past they think that this belonged to them or they had a claim over it, why don't we do a answer over on them?
But why don't we do that? Officially, we haven't done that.
We haven't done that because we are still stuck to what the British told us, the McDonald line. So I think that boldness is partly missing because we do not want things to go out of control, out of hand. So that is perhaps in some part an explanation as to why we seem to be diffident in dealing with China.
Do you think, in all of these prime ministers till date, not using our true Indian history, the ancient Indian history, in our foreign policies, it has been a mistake, a failure, probably?
No, I wouldn't say. You see, past is past. To live in the past would be a folly. But to learn from the past is a different thing. After all, human nature is the same. You make the same mistakes, you meet the same challenges. For example, I was talking about Chanakya. Uh, Many of the prescriptions, for example, today we talk of soft power, hard power, smart power, sharp power. Chanakya had outlined all that. So there is great wisdom in India and in other countries, Greek, Roman. So we must learn from their experience and apply it in a modified form today. But we cannot repeat it blindly, saying that, we are great and we were great. That period is over. It's not going to come back. Because we were great, we can become great if we use methods like them suited to that age and that circumstance in a modified form today.
Okay. So, thank you so much for this conversation. I think I learned a lot about India's foreign policies, the challenges, and the successes that we have had in the past, and even now that we are having. I feel this episode could be a black pill for a lot of people because, as you said, there are going to be a lot of challenges for India in the coming days, and we need to deal with those accordingly. So, there's a lot for people to take away from this episode. So, thank you so much, sir, for this knowledge.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure coming here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked some very tricky questions. And congratulations, because it shows the depth of your understanding. And as I said earlier, I wish your show great success.
Thank you so much, sir.